Hello, everybody. I am Bhagya, and I'll be dealing with Module 1 of Dalit writing. In this lecture, we'll be discussing major concepts in Dalit writing, two important Dalit movements, the Bhakti movement and Dalit Panther movement, and also the role of Dr. Br Ambedkar in initializing these Dalit movements. But before we begin, I'd like to tell you why Dalit writing is part of your curriculum. As students of literature, it is very important to know and understand the significance of Dalit writing as a symbol of resistance. It has an identity of its own. So it's very important to know the contribution of these writers and the key role they continue to play in shaping the society. So let's begin by discussing the major concepts in Dalit writing. And the first question that comes up is, who is a Dalit? If we go back in the history of India to the pre Aryan period, it's said that there was a highly civilized race in India. There were people of different skin color or varna. But unfortunately, there has been no written record describing their lifestyle, culture, tradition, or customs. All that we know today about the different races and categories of people are from the Hindu scriptures, which were earlier known as Aryan scriptures. And these scriptures include the Vedas, Upanishads, Puranas, and such. According to them, all those who were not Aryans were known as Dasa, Dasyu, Fifth Varna, Shudra, Atishudra, and the untouchables. These were the people who did menial jobs. They were not allowed to lead a life of dignity and were perennially oppressed ones. In the fourfold caste system of Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, they occupied the last position. Dalit refers to one's caste rather than class. The first reference of this word could be found in Rig Veda and has its origin in the Sanskrit word dal, which means grounded, broken, and oppressed. We cannot help but wonder at the fact that though Hinduism claims to be an accommodating religion, does it actually practice the egalitarianism or universal brotherhood it stands for? In India, caste plays a decisive role. It almost controls the society. The hierarchy is visible everywhere. But with time, changes appeared in the form of protests leading to movements. Dr. Br Ambedkar, an indispensable figure in Dalit movement, was a pioneer who raised his voice of dissent against the existing caste system and its flaws. He, along with Mahatma Phule, organized a political movement demanding rights for Dalits. It was first of its kind to gain popularity. In the 1960s, Marathi language saw the birth of Dalit writings that shunned the mainstream literature till then. Thus, it began to shape itself as a symbol of resistance. The word Dalit in the contemporary times referred to something more than what it used to be in the past. In the words of Professor Gangadhar Pantwani, to me, Dalit is not a caste. He is a man exploited by social and economic traditions of his country. He doesn't believe in God, rebirth, soul, holy books teaching separatism, fate, and heaven because they have made him a slave. He doesn't believe in humanitism. Dalit is a symbol of change and revolution. And Dalit literature, without doubt, was born out of an urge to bring about a change in the existing ways. But before we move into that movements, let's look in detail at few of the above mentioned concepts. We must also understand the fact that the fourfold caste system that we know today is not something that existed since the beginning of the civilization. The ancient history of India tells us that there existed a different four-order system of social diversification. The Brahmins, that consisted of priests, teachers, and preachers, the Kshatriyas, that consisted of kings, governors, warriors, and soldiers, the Vaishyas, that comprised cattle herders, agriculturalists, and merchants, the Shudras, that comprised laborers and service providers. Though the above categories sound familiar to the fourfold caste system that we know about today, these two had differences. The four order of the society were otherwise called Varna. It carried two meanings, the first being color and the second being wheel. Now let's look at the first one. By color, it did not mean the color of the skin of the people. Instead, it referred to the qualities of energies of the human nature. And by wheel, they meant four different ways in which divinity rested in human beings. So it was not exactly like the fourfold caste system that we know about today. There were differences. But things changed during the Aryan period that brought an end to the egalitarian era. The four Varnas continued to be Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, but with the difference that the Dalits or the Shudras became an outcast and excluded from the system altogether. They became the untouchables. The caste system in India grew deeper roots during the colonial regime. The British started segregating Indians on the basis of caste, and this was implemented by offering administrative tasks and superior positions to those who belonged to the superior caste. The British colonial government enacted an act in 1871, the Criminal Tribes Act of 1871. As per this law, everyone belonging to a certain caste were considered to be born with criminal tendencies. They insisted that caste was essentially religious in character, so that they were spared of any direct criticism. With the social unrest during 1920s, the colonial power was forced to bring about changes in their policies. A certain percentage of jobs were reserved for those belonging to the lower caste from them. After India achieved independence, this policy of caste-based reservation was formalized with list of scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. Now let's discuss common features in caste and analogous system across the world. The first being physical segregation. By physical segregation, it meant that people who belonged to the lower caste were expected to maintain a distance from those who belonged to the superior caste. For instance, even today in India, we have certain villages, an entire village segregated in the name of a caste. Second, being social segregation. For instance, prohibition of intercaste marriages. We know how caste becomes very important, or how much crucial role it plays when it comes to a social institution like marriage. Intercaste marriages are not encouraged in a country like India. And we also know the fact that in case of intercaste marriages, there does take place honor killings or brutal murders in the name of intercaste marriages. Thirdly, assignment of traditional occupations. For instance, manual scavenging, probably one of the most dehumanizing practices that is still prevalent in a country like India. Certain castes are always associated with certain type of occupations. Pervasive debt bondage due to poor remuneration for lower caste occupations. The most exploited of all, the untouchables are also the ones who are rarely paid decently. And as a result, they're always in debt. To top it all, illiteracy, poverty, and landlessness because of lack of opportunities. Use of degrading language to refer to people who belong to lower caste. They're always insulted using language in an insulting manner. Finally, double discrimination against women of low caste. First, in the name of gender, and secondly, in the name of the lower caste they belong to. So, these are just few of the features or practices that happen in a caste based society. If we go by the Aryan invasion theory of Max Muller, Aryans were light skinned people who invaded the northern India and established their system by bringing down an existing one. Primarily, the theory looks at Aryans as a racial group and also as a beginning of Brahmanism. And this brings us to the hierarchy that has been practiced for a long time in the society. As Marx puts it, the ruling ideas of the society are the ideas of the ruling class, and for a very long time, the Brahmins have held the superior position in the social hierarchy. Nothing is constant forever. Though Brahmins held a superior position in the social hierarchy, even that got questioned after a point of time. So now let's take a look at the anti-Brahminical sentiments that flared up in the Indian society. With the spread of Islam and its claim of a unitary God and a universal religion, anti-Brahminical sentiments started in India, especially in the states of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and Maharashtra. Islam spread the idea of one God and one religion that made no discrimination among its believers.
Now, this came as a huge blow to the fourfold caste system in the Hindu society. However, it was near impossible to overcome the hurdle of casteism, which had by then grown deeper roots in the society. As a counter movement, two ethnic groups came to the forefront, the Lingayats and the Kannadas, who tried to contain the spread of Islam in the southern part of India. And it was also the time when Macaulay implemented his new education policy, where he gave opportunities to everyone, even those who belonged to the lower caste, and access to education. And this gave the anti Brahminical sentiments momentum. And with this, the anti Brahminical sentiments gained momentum. The spirit of resistance was further taken forward by innumerable Dalit activists through movements which we'll be looking at shortly. Today, the status of Dalits in the society hasn't changed much from the past, but they have definitely emerged as a group that can't be ignored anymore. They continue to be the symbols of resistance in the society. Now, let's take a look at the movements that shaped Dalit literature today. We'll begin with Bhakti movement. Bhakti movement was primarily a socio-religious movement aimed at reforming Hinduism. This movement originated in South India during the 8th century BC among two groups, the Nayanas, who were the devotees of Lord Shiva, and the Alvars, who were the devotees of Lord Vishnu. One could find the anti-Brahminical sentiment running throughout the movement. One of the greatest attractions of the movement was the fact that they made use of the local and regional language to preach, which was a blow on the face of Brahmins who had monopoly over Sanskrit. They upheld the regional language and did away with Sanskrit, which was accessible only to Brahmins. Thus, the movement succeeded in giving respect to the regional languages. Another attraction of the movement was the involvement of Muslims from the Sufi sect. Bhakti saints were of the belief that moksha or salvation could be attained through a relationship with a personally defined God. In Hinduism, moksha or salvation could be attained only by the Brahmins or those who belong to the superior caste. With the Bhakti movement coming in, they welcomed Shudras to attain salvation and brought down those walls created by the superior caste. They believed in poetry and music as the purest form of devotion. Mirabai is undoubtedly one of the most popular Bhakti saints of India. The movement was later criticized for being not completely anti Brahminical in nature, citing the fact that some of the earliest prominent thinkers belonged to the upper caste. But having said that, Bhakti movement, however, paved way for movements much stronger than that. And we're going to discuss a personality that needs no introduction who initialized such movements in India, Dr. Br Ambedkar.
Dr. B.R. Ambedkar was born into a low caste called Mahar, which is in modern day Madhya Pradesh now. He was allowed to attend the school despite being a low caste, but he was never allowed to sit inside the class. He sat on a gunny sack which he had to take home with. His ancestors worked in the army of British East India Company. Ambedkar went on to become a lawyer by profession. Following his ancestors, he also was forced to serve the military unit of the princely state of Baroda, but soon left it. In 1918, he became the professor of political economy in Sydenham College of Commerce and Economics in Mumbai. But he was never spared of being a low caste. He underwent a lot of discriminations from his colleagues during that time. The scene tends to change when the South Borough Committee invited him in the preparation of Government of India Act 1919. He seized the opportunity and put forward the demands of creating separate electorates and reservation for untouchables. This was only the beginning. When he started practicing law in the Bombay High Court, he organized the Bahishkrita Hitakarani Sabha with the intention of promoting education and socio-economical improvement of the depressed classes. Ambedkar publicly condemned the classic Hindu text Manusmriti for justifying the caste system. He went on to launch many active protests and movements against untouchability. Ambedkar was not a man of violent protest. Let me tell you about the Kalaram Temple movement that he launched in 1930. Almost 15,000 volunteers took part in it. They were men, women, and children, led by a military band headed towards the temple to see the god for the first time. When they reached the temple, the priests closed the gates before them. This movement was for human dignity and self respect. Following Ambedkar's suggestion in 1932, the British Prime Minister announced the formation of separate electorates in British India for forward caste, lower caste, and different other communities. Gandhiji opposed the idea of separate electorates, fearing the division of Hindu community. He even went on a fast. Following this, Madan Mohan Malaviya and Ambedkar signed the Pune Pact on 25th September 1932. According to the Pune Pact, it allowed reserved seats for depressed classes in the provisional legislatures within the general electorate and not by creating a separate electorate. He continued his fight against inequality and atrocities against untouchables. At a later point in his life, he expressed his desire to convert to Buddhism. In 1936, he founded the Independent Labour Party, and this was also the year when his book, The Annihilation of Caste, came out, one of the classics in Dalit writings. He died in 1957. He was a social reformer in its truest sense. He condemned social discrimination everywhere till his last breath. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar and his ideologies went on to inspire a lot of Dalit movements in future. One of the most important one was Dalit Panther movement of 1972. Dalit Panther movement was founded by Namdeo Dhasal and J.V. Power in Maharashtra in the year 1972 to fight against caste discrimination. This was also inspired by the Black Panther Party, a movement that originated in the United States during the civil rights movement as a protest against racial discrimination against Afro Americans. Unlike the earlier Dalit movements, Dalit Panther movement was noted for its revolutionary spirit, attitude, and approach. However, what remained unchanged was the anger against Hindu caste system that treated the lower caste badly. The movement received the support of young men in newspapers like Navkal, Navshakti, and Maratha. Also, the period 1955 to 1975 in Marathi literature was dominated by the Little Magazine movement. It encouraged the Dalit movement of the times as they questioned the established Marathi literary scene which belonged to the upper caste. Ashok Shahana, Dilip Chitre, Arun Kolatkar were the pioneers of the movement. In 1973, Dalit Panther Manifesto was brought out, which integrated the Marxian views of exploitation with Ambedkar's critique of the culture. One of the greatest achievements of Dalit Panther movement was that it forced the government to fulfill the backlog of reservation. And not just that, it brought the focus of the world to a category of people who were until then ignored. But in 1974, the Dalit Panthers split owing to differences in ideology and other factors. However, Dalit Panther movement challenged a lot of, but we must not forget the fact that it was the Dalit Panther movement that created a counterculture and also paved way for the Dalit writings and the Dalit literature as we see today. All said, it also challenged a society led by the upper caste people to rethink on its ways. And thus we reach the end of part 1 of module 1. But before we conclude, let's quickly rewind the important points that we discussed in today's lecture. We began discussing the concept of Dalit, who's a Dalit. We also tried to trace the history of Dalits, how it came to how it was formed, how a particular group came to be called as a Dalit. We discussed caste. We discussed social hierarchy. We looked at how a four-order system was in existence and how different it is from the four-fold caste system we know today. We discussed about the anti-Brahminical sentiments that came into the scene later, as a result of which the movements followed. We discussed the Bhakti movement, one of the earliest Dalit protest, and the role of Dr. Br Ambedkar, a pioneer in Dalit protest, and how he initiated various, or how much he has influenced further movements. And we also discussed the Dalit Panther movement, which was inspired by the Black Panther Party of the United States of America. Now we have more movements to be discussed, which we'll do in the next part. So, thank you so much for listening. And if you have any doubts or if you need any clarification, please feel free to comment below. Thank you.